one more minute. I feel like I'm on Channel 4. You kind of got to wait for the minute. You got to wait for the clock to turn so we can turn on the live stream. Yeah, that's right. Actually, it's just been kind of interesting because the last few weeks, I got off the plane from General Conference and I had Channel 9 and Channel 5 wanted back-to-back interviews, and you don't really have time to prepare for these. They just call up and they come. So anyway, it is 11:30. We're going to start. My name is Judy Zabel, as you well know, but there are some that are joining us by live stream today. We welcome you to this General Conference debriefing. Want to let you know that I appreciate all the prayers and all of the emails of concern and support for this congregation that I've received in the past week. It's just been marvelous, and it's been heartening to know that you are ready to hang in and to be a unified church, and so I'm very grateful for that. I want to just jump right into our debriefing. I want to tell you kind of what I have planned for today. I'm going to go through the General Conference debriefing in these slides. I want to give thanks to Reverend Tom Berlin from Florist United Methodist Church in Virginia. He prepared some of these for his church, and so I asked permission to use them, and he said, of course, that would be fine. And so we want to give thanks to Tom Berlin for his help with that. After I do the General Conference debriefing, all kind of the jots and tittles and all the information, the facts about it, then we will have a question and answer time. And we want to make sure that we have the mics, and I'm going to ask John and Taylor to help out with passing the mics so we can ask questions. If we don't have time for your question this morning, I hope that you will email me, because as they are coming in to me, I am answering them, going back to the people who send them and making sure that you get the answers. If I don't know the answers, I'll try to find the answers to your question. And there are some questions we just don't have answers for yet, but we're on our journey together. I want to also let you know that we're going to have a statement from John Nygren and Taylor Reeb, who are our co-chairs of our Strategic Council, and they will do have a short statement. And then I believe Randy Barreto is going to be here today, although I don't see him right this moment, to give a statement about why he is choosing to stay at Hennepin. And then I will have some closing words of encouragement, which will take just 1 minute, and then we'll go on our way. So let's begin first with our General Conference debriefing. This is what it looks like at General Conference. The conference was a special called Conference of the Bishops, and it was in 2019, just a couple weeks ago in St. Louis. And some people have asked the question, how much did this cost us to get together for 4 days to decide nothing almost? And that was $3.6 million went, because we had so many international delegates. And so it's very expensive to hold a general conference. All right, I'm going to see if I can get this to work. The background is the special conference was the first such off-year gathering. The United Methodist Church has a general conference every 4 years. We're due to have the next general conference in 2020. It will be May of 2020, and Minneapolis will be the host city. But this is only the second in this century, in the last 2 centuries, of a special called conference. We haven't had one since 1970, which came about after long tensions boiled over the 2016 General Conference in Portland, Oregon. We said we need to have a special conference to see if there's any way we could keep the church together. Even in 2016, we were experiencing a lot of discord and a lot of division, and there had been some of the factions that came to 2016 in Portland has said it's time for a split in the United Methodist Church. We have irretractable differences around human sexuality. We were able to ask people to wait, and so a commission was formed. I'll talk to you more about that. But the special conference was formed so that it was to help us to move forward with to answer 3 major questions. To talk about the incompatibility language in the Book of Discipline, and by that I mean in our Book of Discipline since 1972. Wasn't in there before 72, but in 1972 the language was added that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. And that has been a thorn in our side ever since. So we wanted to talk about whether we could take that incompatibility language out of the Book of Discipline. Then we also wanted to talk about, can we have same-gender marriages in our sanctuaries? We currently are prohibited from doing that, and we have not done that in Hennepin. But the question was, can we relax that in certain contexts where that's appropriate? The third question was, could we have ordained United Methodist ministers who are gay? We have prohibited that from all time. That includes bishops because they are ordained elders in the United Methodist Church. But you know that we do have closeted gay clergy, both deacons and elders in the church now. But they do live in the closet. And we do have an openly gay bishop in the western jurisdiction of the United Methodist Church, which just drives some people crazy, because our book of discipline says no, and we have many people across the denomination who are not upholding the book of discipline, and that drives some people crazy. The General Conference authorized the bishops in 2016 to form the 32-member Commission on a Way Forward to find ways to help the church stay together. It was a call to a special General Conference to take up that commission's proposals. Important to know that the 32-member Commission on General Conference came from all across the globe, and it had gay and straight people on it. And it was a global commission. And they started their work saying, we need to know that we disagree about a lot of things, but we need to come together and pray about this and to discuss openly our questions. And they did that. And one of the reports that was most powerful at the General Conference in St. Louis was that they bonded, and that the bond of peace was with them by the end of the commission. And so we know that God can bring people together when we come with open hearts. There were 4 plans. The first were the 3 plans that were presented to the Council of Bishops. You're going to have to flip this for me. It's not working. So I'm going to put it down, and I'm just going to say, change the slide now. All right. Change the slide now. Oh, we're having technical difficulties, but I'm going to talk about the floor plans. There were 3 plans originally presented to the Council of Bishops. And so because the bishops called for the commission, they got the first report. The One Church plan was a report that said we could be one church. It would provide generous unity that gave conferences, churches, and pastors flexibility to uniquely reach their missional context in relation to human sexuality, without changing the connectional nature of the United Methodist Church. We are a global church, and what happens in Africa is a little different than what happens at 511 Groveland. And so we know the contexts are different, and so we needed that flexibility. The One Church plan would have allowed for that flexibility, would have left questions of marriage up to the individual churches and clergy, and ordination up to the boards of ordained ministries in each annual conference. The One Church plan has the backing of the majority of the bishops. 80% of the bishops said yes to the One Church plan, and it was affirmed by the majority of the commission members, that 32-member commission. It also was affirmed by 66% of the American delegates, who said, we disagree about how this can be, but we think unity is more important than this disagreement. Another plan was presented. It was called the Traditional Plan, and it's the one that was passed, and I will talk more about that in a minute, but it affirms currently what is in the Book of Discipline and offers provisions for greater accountability and enforcement. It is punitive. If someone does a same-sex marriage and is caught and a complaint is filed with the bishop must deal with that complaint, or they will lose their credentials. And the pastor would be put on a 1-year suspended leave of absence without pay. If it was twice that happened, we would lose our credentials. That's what the Traditionalist plan. It's for greater accountability enforcement. The Connectional Conference plan would have created 3 theologically based conferences in the United States only. Not in the central conferences in Europe, Africa, and the Philippines, but just in the United States. 3 theologically based conferences: progressive, a unity conference, and a traditional conference. And it would have been yoked by the Council of Bishops and the Board of Pensions. But it would have been 3 distinct connectional bodies with their own books of discipline. The simple plan was added later by the Queer Caucus. And the simple plan said, we don't think we can solve this, but we don't want any discrimination anywhere on the globe. So they were saying, it's a simple plan just to remove the incompatible language out of the Book of Discipline. This did not get very much traction at all at the General Conference. Next slide. So what is the General Conference? The General Conference is the only body that speaks officially for the United Methodist Church. The bishops cannot do that. Isn't that surprising? Some of you have asked, where were the bishops in the General Conference? The bishops at the General Conference they sit at the back and the front, but they only sit there to watch, and only bishops that are presiding bishops are allowed to speak. There are no votes, no voice for the bishops at the General Conference. The General Conference meets every 4 years, as I said. It's a global body of delegates from each annual conference, and the numbers are based on the membership of those annual conferences. We're a very small conference. We had 4 delegates, 2 lay, 2 clergy. Next year, at the 2020 conference, we will have 1 clergy, 1 lay, and that is because of the decline in Minnesota in our membership in the United Methodist Church. There is equal number of clergy and lay delegates. This is different from our Catholic brothers and sisters. This is different from our Lutheran brothers and sisters and Episcopalians. But we have equal numbers of lay and clergy that make up the General Conference. Next slide. This is a map, and it's very small, but I'll tell you what it means. You see that there are different regions in the world, and we're all over the world. The United Methodists around the world are divided up into jurisdictions and annual conferences, and I'm not going to spend very much time, but if you look at the U.S., you'll see there are 5 jurisdictions or 5 areas. We're in the north central jurisdiction. That's the orange part up there. And then you can see that Russia is a huge land mass, lots of green there. There are very few United Methodists in Russia, but they are there, and they are conservative. You can see all the Methodists that are in Africa, and there are growing in large numbers in Africa. We have about 7 million United Methodists in the United States, and we have 5 million more in Africa, and it is growing exponentially. It's growing very, very fast to make a total of over 12 million United Methodists. All right, next slide. I wanted you to have a sense of the global representation. There are 864 delegates at the General Conference. There will be in 2020 as well. 504 from the U.S., 58% right now. 260 from Africa, in case you can't see in the back. 50 from the Philippines, 40 from Europe and Eurasia, and 10 from concordant churches, which are, they have a special relationship with the United States. That would be like the Methodists in Mexico or in Jamaica. Those are not United Methodists, but they are Methodists that have concordant relationships. The Lutherans also have concordant relationships with us, and they get a few delegates to come to General Conference. All right, so that's kind of the makeup. Now I wanted you to see the next slide. You can see that in 2004, the Central Conference delegates are in the red, and the American delegates are in the blue. And you can see how those lines are coming together, and we expect by 2024 and 2028, those lines will cross. Do you see what's happening in the United Methodist Church? Many, many more delegates coming from our central conferences. And why is that a deal? Because they tend to be conservative. They tend to vote traditional. And the reason for that is because they come from cultures where it is not, they're not able to talk about human sexuality publicly. It is a taboo in Africa. And in fact, in all except for 6 countries in Africa, it is illegal to be homosexual, and if you're caught, you can be punished by death. It makes it very difficult then when we come to General Conference to talk about homosexuality. Because A, they aren't used to talking about it at all. They're struggling with polygamy in Africa. That's their big topic at the conferences in Africa. And secondly, it's a difficult topic. And then thirdly, remember this. At every General Conference, we translate it into 6 languages. So you just think about that for a minute, how hard it would be to translate a taboo subject that you never talk about it, and you're talking about it with strangers, people you don't know, you don't have any trust, you haven't shared any stories, and now you're going to do that through an interpreter. It really makes it very difficult. So that is our challenge, really. Wanted to let you know that the next slide is about the petitions that passed, how we figured out how we were going to deal with things. In a normal general conference, we'll have a few days, almost a week really, of what's called legislative sessions. And we break up into smaller committees and work on the petitions that are submitted to general conference. And we clean them up and we amend them and we get them ready to take to the plenary. This was a special conference. It was only 4 days instead of 10 days, and so we only had 78 petitions to deal with, but we decided, the planners of the General Commission and General Conference decided that the whole group would be a legislative body, a legislative committee. So we had a process of sorting and sifting the petitions by doing sort of almost a straw vote. We went through all of the petitions, and we clustered the petitions around each plan, and then we voted on how important it was to deal with those petitions. So this was a ranking order to see which ones we would deal with first. Why did we do that? Because if you run out of time at a general conference, the petitions that are not dealt with are sunsetted. They disappear. But our rules say that we have to deal and vote on every petition that has been submitted to the General Conference. So what normally happens is we start ranking them in order of importance, and then if we have extra petitions that don't get talked about, someone makes a motion to just rule them out, so that we can clean up the schedule, the calendar. So when we did the ranking of importance of the petitions, the first ones that came up were Westpath petitions. Westpath is our pensions. And we didn't agree on very much at the General Conference, but what we did agree is that whatever happens, we want to take care of our retired clergy. They have served well in our denomination, and we don't want them to be hanging out there to dry. So Westpath, who are very smart and lawyered up in a good way, really smart people, had written several petitions on how to keep the pensions solvent. If we had conferences that left, if we had jurisdictions that left, if we had a lot of churches that left, they were really good at planning scenarios and getting us ready for that. The petitions passed overwhelmingly for the Westpath petitions because we do care about our retirees. The traditional plan petitions were next, and we talked about them, and they were highly ranked. And that first day when we were in legislative session, we knew we were in trouble for the one church plan when we saw the ranking so high for the traditional plan. So we worked and we tried to get to our fellow delegates and to try to do some caucusing and some work to help people see why the one church plan could be better than a traditional plan, because it would hold the church together. And because the Judicial Council had ruled that the one church plan was constitutional, and the traditional plan has been ruled unconstitutional. So we'll talk more about that in a few moments. There were disaffiliation petitions. Those are exit plans. There were 2 of them, and a minority report that was filed, and one of them passed, and it too is largely unconstitutional. But I'll tell you in a few moments about what that one is. A disaffiliation plan is a plan for a gracious, if that can be, a gracious exit out of the denomination. It was prepared by the Wesleyan Covenant Association, which is a group of conservatives who have said, we want the traditional plan or we're leaving. And they were ready to leave. They had registered in 50 states to start a new denomination, a Wesleyan Covenant Association. So imagine their surprise when the traditionalist plan passed. But there you go. You never know. The disaffiliation petitions we'll talk more about. The one church plan was ranked down number 4, and of course we had to deal with that in that order. The Westpath petitions, I already told you, were approved. They recommend that the benefits and the investments, the denomination's pension agency, they manage those assets. It's a lot of money. So it's good that we had these conversations about our pension. The pension represents $21 billion. It's one of the largest pensions in the nation. bears reporting that within 13 hours, I'm getting ahead of myself, excuse me. We wanted to make sure that those clergy members who wanted to end their relationship with the United Methodist Church also would be treated with terminated vested, and would continue to have their pensions even if they decided to leave the denomination. I won't go into the technical details of that, but that will be the information that is available on the Westpath website. This is one area that we all agreed on, and that was good to start the conference that way. But no matter what, we want to make sure that these petitions were protected and adopted for protection for now and for the future. All right, then we went to the traditional plan, and so we had a traditional plan petitions, as I said, were to put in more teeth, to keep the wording and the discipline. It was an expansion of the definition of self-avowed practicing homosexual to say that it includes people who are living in same-sex marriage, domestic partnership, or civil union, or it is a person who publicly states that she or he is a practicing homosexual. That's been added to our Book of Discipline. It used to say practicing homosexuals, and so people would be homosexual, they would practice as clergy, but would say that they were not in a committed relationship. But now the Book of Discipline says that it includes anyone who says they are homosexual, gay, lesbian, all that. The legislation sets a minimum penalty for clergy performing same-sex wedding of 1 year's suspension, as I said, without pay, first offense, and the loss of credentials for the second. Then we dealt with the disaffiliation plans. Next slide. Next slide, please. All right, they're going to come, but I'll just keep going. Disaffiliation, there were two that were major ones, the Taylor one and the Boyette plan. Several were submitted. The one that passed allows churches, after following a process of discernment, to leave the denomination with their property after paying some of the liabilities, such as pension, building loans, and apportionments. The legislation specifies that the process for exiting is expected to complete prior to December 31st of 2023. So churches have a lot of time to decide whether they're going to leave the denomination. The Council of Bishops asked for a decision from the Judicial Council on the constitutionality of this petition as it was amended, and it is going to be judged. The judges on our Judicial Council will decide if it's constitutional on April 23rd to the 25th. Some additional information concerning voting patterns that may be included here is that in order to pass, for a congregation to leave, I believe it still says in the disaffiliation plan, it will take a 2/3 vote of a congregation to leave the denomination. All right. It's important to know that the traditional passed, but it was by only a small margin. The division of the body was clear from voting patterns throughout the General Conference. Almost every vote fell somewhere in the 53 to 58% to 43 to 47% range. And so one of the votes actually was exactly 50-50. The supermajority, there was a voting patterns also tell her there's a clear supermajority of delegates from outside the United States. Our 3 African Central Conferences with delegates from Eurasia and the Philippines. 2/3 of the American and Western European delegates supported the one church plan. 1/3 of the U.S. delegates and the supermajority of the Central Conference delegates supported the traditional plan, which is why it passed. Now, what we don't yet know is whether it will be constitutional. And by that is the United Methodist Church, we have a constitution, and any petitions that pass have to pass muster with the Judicial Council in terms of their constitutionality. We already know that there were 18 petitions for the traditional plan, and 10 of them have been ruled already unconstitutional. There were some amendments that were made at the General Conference to try to fix them up, but it's likely they will still be ruled unconstitutional. Any petition or any paragraph of the Book of Discipline that is ruled unconstitutional by our Judicial Council will not be in the Book of Discipline. So you can see that they will just simply drop away. It will not be included in the Book of Discipline. The unconstitutional petitions deal with subjects such as episcopal accountability and responsibilities, compositions of the boards of ordained ministry, that's the board that decides who will be ordained, the examination of candidates for ministry by the boards of ordained ministry, and the disaffiliation, the procedures for churches who want to leave, and the just resolutions. Just resolutions are what's used when we have church trials. So if someone would bring me up on complaint, the bishop would receive the complaint, and then the first step is to work on a just resolution between the two parties, the one who did the offense or the alleged offense, and the one who's bringing the charge. And they work at this process until they can find a just resolution. And so there were some petitions that would take that part out and just circumvent that process, that fair process in the trial process. And so they are wondering if that is constitutional and probably will be ruled out of order. So the plans, that traditional plan supporters amended some of the legislation again, but didn't address all the previously identified constitutional issues. What the conservatives tried to do in the legislation of the traditional plan is to take the power away from the bishops in terms of trials, because they believe that the bishops have not all been accountable to the Book of Discipline. And so they began to think of ways that they could circumvent that process so that they could take people out faster, essentially. So what's changed in our local church? We are still under the current Book of Discipline. And if we've been following that Book of Discipline, there are very little changes, except for that if I decide to be in disobedience to the Book of Discipline, people could come after me. What about the local church? The church is uniquely reaching out to serving LGBTQ community. This is very trying, disturbing, and it causes us to grieve because it harms our ministry and it hampers our ability to reach out to our neighborhood. We live here in this church in the midst of the greatest number of the LGBTQ population in the state of Minnesota, and I believe that it's important for us to be able to minister to our neighborhood on our context with all the pastoral functions that any pastor would offer to anyone. So this is a problem for us. Some people say, well, what makes this general conference different from previous general conferences around that? Don't we just kind of live with what we got and just hope it gets better in the future? To me, it's a game changer. This conference was a game changer because we know that there are additional penalties that have been added, and we've had sort of in Minnesota a don't ask, don't tell kind of policy. And that will end because Bishop O will have to sign a paper that says he will uphold the Book of Discipline and deal with any charges and complaints that come before him, or he will not get paid. GCFA will not be able to release any Episcopal funds for bishops who are in disagreement and disobedience of the Book of Discipline. The Board of Ordained Ministry in Minnesota will be required to sign a covenant that said that they will ask every candidate. It will be a litmus test. Now, Minnesota Annual Conference is quite a progressive conference, and so our Board of Ordained Ministry immediately put a statement out last week that said, we will not ask. So they are openly defying the Book of Discipline in that, or it won't be put into order until January 1st, 2020, but already they have said we will not comply with the Book of Discipline as it is written in the traditionalist plan. So, what do we do here? Well, we're going to talk about that in just a little bit, but first I want to ask you if you have any questions. I thought there might be a few. I'm going to ask John to bring the mic. Please say your name if you're comfortable doing that, because we're in covenant community with one another. Now, I want to ask you something. Before you speak, remember this. As we've been talking about human sexuality in the church for many, many years, we have talked about it in so many different ways, and oftentimes we start talking about it as an issue. Please remember that we are a church, and this is true globally, with LGBTQ members, and they're in the room. So let us be very careful how we talk about this, because we're talking about our beloved members and friends and family members. There are some people who say, well, what's the big deal? I want you to do this. If you are LGBTQ yourself, and you don't have to do this if you don't want to, it's just a free thing, or if you have someone in your family, or you have a very close friend who is LGBTQ+, would you raise your hand if you're comfortable? Yeah, me too. You see why this is such a big issue, that this is an important question for us to grapple with in the church. And even in Africa, where they vote traditional, there are LGBTQ members in those churches as well, and we know that they're there, closeted, many of them. So let us be kind with one another and gentle with each other as we talk and ask our questions. But let us remember the gravity of our work together as a church on this matter, because it's very important that we continue to have these honest, open, transparent, and loving conversations. Okay, first question over here.
I just have a question for clarification. If a church chooses to disaffiliate, does it assume ownership of its property?
That's a very good question, asking about the ownership of the property. We do not own the property. The Minnesota Annual Conference and the United Methodist Church has a trust clause on all of our properties. We don't own the property, so part of the negotiating of the disaffiliation petitions are going to be around, does a church congregation, will they be allowed to take their property with them if they disaffiliate? As it is written today, the answer is yes. But I want you to know that this will be all up for grabs in 2020, because most of the disaffiliation petition will be ruled out of order, out of constitutionality, and it will be rewritten. I've been invited to a conversation with Adam Hamilton, Mike Slaughter, Kent Millard, a number of the leaders from the centrist and progressive side, and then all the heavy hitters with the conservatives and the Good News Movement, the IRD, and the WCA. We're going to talk about what kind of legislation we can write for a graceful exit for 2020. We hope it passes. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy because the conservatives say, we won the church. We have control. And they do have the votes. So it's going to be a tricky conversation to work that out, but we'll do the very best we can to see how we can do that. But frankly, I will say I can't speak for the annual conference, and I would never speak for the bishop. But I will say that I think it's unlikely, but I can't promise this, but it would be unlikely that the conference will want all the property of churches who disaffiliate. There's a large number of churches talking about disaffiliation. We had a clergy gathering in Twin Cities this last week, and there seems to be quite a fervor around that. And the annual conference does not have the means to take care of this building. I mean, so it would be unlikely they would want to take it. But, I can't speak for the conference. I hope that answers your question. That was a long answer. I'll try to be shorter next time. But I know some of the rest of you are going to ask me that same question. Okay, Chuck is over here.
I'm Chuck Roach, and I noticed that the Great Britain was not part of the United Methodist Church map up there.
That's right.
If there's disaffiliation, why not join the Methodist in Great Britain?
Well, that's an option. There are an awful lot of options that we will have to look at as a congregation. The British Methodists, from whence we came, many, many years ago when the United Methodist, or the Methodist Church was founded in the U.S., came from the British Methodist, and or its predecessors. And there will be other options for us to look at. There is a new denomination. There are leaders, Adam Hamilton being one of them, from Church of the Resurrection, our largest United Methodist church in North America, with 22,000 members. He's already starting to talk with leaders. He will be meeting with them in May to start talking about a new denomination that is Methodist, that will be inclusive. We're going to watch that very carefully. But hear this. Starting a new denomination takes time. So if we think that at Hennepin we're going to make decisions about our future in just a few weeks, I'm going to caution us, because I think it's better for us to really hang together tight and strong and keep doing our ministry with fervor and with passion, and let's listen and be careful to pray and to see what is coming, because I think God is stirring up some new things, and we may want to be a part of. So. All right. Nancy Eicher.
I'm Nancy Eicher, and I'm going way back to my childhood, right? And understanding that even my little tiny Methodist church in my little tiny hometown had missionaries in Africa we supported. So if the church does in fact split, I'm assuming that it will largely be kind of North America versus, Africa and Asia sort of as the primary split. What happens to the support for the churches in Africa, and does that put them in jeopardy of not being able to carry out their ministries?
That's a very, very good question. 70% of the general apportion budget comes from the United States. 30% comes from our central conferences. And as you know, as you said, many of our missionaries, both American and international missionaries who are out on the field in 40 different countries through our General Board of Global Ministries, this does endanger their funding and their work. And I say if the church splits, but it really looks pretty inevitable that it will split. How that will shake out, we don't know exactly. I'm going to go out on a limb. Nobody knows the future. Nobody has a crystal ball. But we do know that in 2012, the General Conference, I was there as a delegate, the lead delegate there. There was a plan for restructuring the United Methodist Church, and the conservatives put in petitions from southeast and southeast jurisdiction, where the growth is high in the church, has a lot of delegates. They tried to dismantle our boards and agencies. They were unsuccessful because the structuring plan was ruled unconstitutional by the Judicial Council even before we left. But I have no reason to believe that they would try to do that again, to dismantle our boards and agencies. Some of them might still be retained. Another reason I think that is because when the commission was talking about the connectional plan and discussing that in the commission, and they presented it, those three bodies in the connectional plan, each one would be able to choose which boards and agencies, general boards and agencies, they would want to support. They could look at the menu and they could choose to support some and choose to not support some others. And that kind of smoked out where they were, where the traditionalists were. They said we would support very few of the boards and agencies. So you're right, it is putting our global ministry in danger. Absolutely. Now, that point was made over and over to the central conferences, particularly in Africa, but also in Eurasia. And they believe that it is time to end colonialism and to begin to figure out how they can be more independent or be able to pay their fair share. But it's going to take a while, because remember that an average person in Sierra Leone makes $120 US a year. So that will be very difficult for them. So we'll see what happens with that. We do have a team in Baiwala right now. I forgot to mention that this morning, but it was in the bulletin, and so pray for them. Bishop Yambasu was a proponent of the traditionalist plan. He is the bishop in Sierra Leone. We sent our team, and we said, the children of Baiwala are still hungry. We're feeding 900 kids a day. They didn't have any part in this decision, and we're not going to punish them for that. But something to keep in mind as we begin to think about our relationships and where we will invest our missional dollars here at Hennepin. Okay, another question. I think Norm And then I think, Kristen, you had your hand up for a while.
My name's Norm Bryden, and I don't know the Book of Discipline all that well. Is there anyone else that's been singled out to be excluded? Murderers, drug addicts, heterosexual couples that are living outside of wedlock? Or is it just this one group that's been chosen to be excluded?
It is. And that was debated fiercely on the floor. Once the progressives and centrists knew that we had lost the one church plan and the traditional plan had passed, I have to admit we were running out the clock, and we were trying to amend everything we could possibly amend to keep it from really moving as far as it was going to move. And we had several impassioned speakers at the mic who said, well, if the traditionalists want to have doctrinal purity and scriptural purity and put in purity laws, then let's say adultery, second marriages, polygamy, all of the things that are listed in Scripture that we have shifted our thinking around in terms of divorce and those kinds of things, and it was quite heated. Quite heated. Interestingly enough, none of the traditionalists or the Central Conference or any of the traditionalists were not at the mic defending scriptural integrity at that point. Just saying. Now, I'm not trying to demonize the traditionalists. I want to say this very clearly. We are brothers and sisters in the kingdom of God with traditionalists. And there might be even some in the room today. But here's the thing. They're children of God too. And they have a certain view of how they interpret Scripture. And they believe with all their hearts that they are doing the right thing for the United Methodist Church because they love the church as much as progressives and centrists. They do. And they are God-fearing people, and they are people who do mission in Africa, and they are people who teach their children in Sunday school all kinds of good things, and they are good United Methodists in so many ways. And the difference between the traditionalists and the centrists and progressives is that we've said, we know there are differences, and we could live in a big tent. But the traditionalists said over and over and over again, no, we cannot. We cannot bend on this. And that was the hardest thing about being at General Conference, is just that whole resistance to any compromise, to any light between the cracks. We just couldn't move them there. And that, to me, was a Wesleyan problem, because Wesley talked about being open and broad in our grace. And so I wrote an article for the Inspire. You can catch it when it comes out. But this was not just about human sexuality, but also about our theological understanding of the interpretation of Scriptures and our theology. I'm going to teach on that this summer. What's happened in the central conferences, and I think in the South as well, I've noticed over the last 4 general conferences I had to sit through, is that Calvinism has moved into our denomination. Calvinist theology, which is, I'm going to teach you about that this summer so you can see the difference between Calvinist and Reformed theology and Wesleyan theology that is based on grace. We're going to talk more about that, but that really started to crystallize for me when I was sitting there listening to the speeches for and against the traditional plan. So we have some work to do as Methodists, so that if we start a new denomination, or if we continue in the United Methodist Church, that we start to reclaim our Wesleyan heritage, because it's powerful and it's good. Now, I'll say that I believe I'm a traditionalist. And the reason why is I'm a traditionalist for Wesleyan theology. I'm not a traditionalist around human sexuality. All right? We're going to talk more about that, but I wanted you to see that too. This is a very nuanced and complicated issue. Our discussion across the denomination is not just about human sexuality. Okay, I think Kristen had her hand up forever. Then comes Steve.
So I just want to understand better what the effect of the constitutionality decision in April is. So I assume, based on how deep our discussion is going, that if this plan is ruled unconstitutional, that doesn't solve our problem. But what would the effect of that decision be?
All those petitions for disaffiliation will drop. unless there's parts of it that are ruled constitutional, but most of it will be ruled out of constitutionality. So that means that in 2020 in Minneapolis, in May of Minneapolis, we'll have to pass something else about disaffiliation. Otherwise, we will have to follow what the current discipline says about churches who want to leave the denomination. Right now, it says that we have to negotiate with the Minnesota Annual Conference, with our bishop and our board of trustees in the conference to decide how it will go, who will get what. It's likely that if we don't nail this down carefully in a petition and put a new paragraph into the Book of Discipline, that we will have endless court battles. Because that's what's happened in the past, and it's what happened with the Episcopalians and Lutherans. Although the Lutherans are more autonomous in their buildings. They own their buildings. Methodists were under a trust clause. Guess when that trust clause was put in? Long time ago, in the 1700s. It comes out of the Anglican Church. John Wesley put the trust clause in. Oh, I didn't even know that. Okay. All right, I think that Steve had a question. Are you finished, Kristen? Yes, it is. Most of it will drop, that the pieces that I told you about today will stay in. Yeah. But there might be pieces that it'll be amended and it'll be shifted around so that it'll be constitutional. By 2020, the traditionalists will fix it. Okay. Although they did try to fix it 3 times now, and it hasn't passed yet in terms of constitutionality. It's a sticky wicket, and the longer it takes for them to fix it, I guess kind of the better. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Steve.
Yeah, actually, Steve Cope and I have 2 quick questions. One probably doesn't matter much anymore, but how we got here, and that is, I thought that the bishops charged when they set up the way forward process, that they asked the commission to come up with one plan that would be put to an up or down vote.
It was never said that they would have one plan to do an up or down vote. But you are correct in that the bishops said, we want you to come back with one plan that we would debate and have petitions around. Would never be an up and down vote. They came back with one plan. The commission recommended the one church plan overwhelmingly, and it came into the Council of Bishops. The bishops themselves are divided on this. And even though it overwhelmingly passed in the bishops, the conservative bishops, about 20% of them, said we have to present the connectional plan and the traditional plan as options that were looked at. It was their way to get that in through the back door. And then it morphed over several months to become, there are 3 plans to consider. It shifted. You are correct that it was originally we would come with one plan, and then over time it shifted, and that was from the pressures on the traditionalist side.
And then the other question I have is, I know some UMC congregations, 2 particularly in Texas, have said we are going to perform gay weddings in our church. Could we not follow that path? We
can. There are many churches in the Twin Cities, the United Methodists, who are doing gay marriages. I know that this congregation looked at that in 2012, and because of the timing of that with Bruce's retirement and some other factors that were at play, this congregation did not end up taking a vote on that. I have, out of respect for this congregation not having a vote on that, have not done gay marriages in our sanctuary because our trustees and our congregation has not decided to do that yet. If this congregation should decide to do that, I'd be happy to do that. I think that the stakes are higher for me now with this new traditionalist plan having just passed. So we'll have to weigh that. But I'm willing to do that as soon as this congregation says it's your will to do that. You don't need me kicked out? No. That's heartening. All right. Other questions? I think we have Rogers over here, and then Terry, and then I think
Rogers Adams. I have a question about enforcement. What if the majority of bishops in the United States just decided to sit on their hands and not do either, not even consider and carry forward the action on complaints, but it was collect the complaints and just sat with them
That's
and
what
say,
they do
well,
now.
I've got to think about that. It takes more time for me to work it through.
There are time frames in the Book of Discipline. You have to. I knew this from being a district superintendent. You have to address a complaint within 120 days by Book of Discipline. But there's ways around that, and that's currently occurring. That is kind of what's happening now. It infuriates the traditionalists, and that's why they added more accountability to the traditionalist plan to prevent that. Mm-hmm. That has been tried, and that's what's actually happening. All right, I think Terry and then Jim, and then I think we're going to end our time for questions, but I'll invite you to send them to me anyway. Yeah.
Hi, Terry Close. I'm a new member here since November. One of the reasons I joined was because of our stance on this church. So I guess I have a question and a comment. Is what does this say to people that want to join this church that are not heterosexuals, and are you welcomed as members?
Yes.
I'm to this church, yes, but then a label does mean something, and so that is concerning. And I'd like to ask you to comment a little bit more about reaching out to our community and how that's perceived as, and how you could be penalized, or we could be penalized because of that.
So the first question is, how can we be a church that doesn't welcome those who are not heterosexual? And the fact is that this congregation is so proud of you, because you are trailblazers on this, and you're known nationally for your progressive stance on this. Since 1993, this congregation has been what's called a reconciling congregation, which means we have been very loudly saying we are open and affirming. The Book of Discipline does not prohibit LGBTQIA from joining the church. Laity can be. However, as you say, and as you've noted, and I have noted many times, LGBTQ plus do not feel very welcome in a church that has officially said, we don't want you. I just can't stand for that sort of thinking that says that LGBTQ and their family and friends are second-rate citizens. They are not. All persons are persons of sacred worth. All persons should be welcomed into the church, and I believe that there's scriptural integrity in saying so. And we will continue that stance as a congregation. We will continue to stand with LGBTQ. We will stand firm and stand strong, and we will be vocal about that. But it does make it more difficult because our brand is tarnished. So there are some of us who are starting to say, these are intractable differences. These are irreconcilable differences that are not likely to be changed because of the growing number of Central Conference delegates. They're, again, culturally not there yet. And a sociologist that was part of Tom Berlin's congregation asked a question at his Q&A. He lived in Egypt, on the northern part of Africa, and they asked him, how long do you think it would take them culturally to shift to be a more open culture around homosexuality? And he said 30 to 40 years. Now, here's the thing. During General Conference, the young adults, they gather every other year, worldwide, globally. They're not of all the same mind, because some of them are from Russia and from Africa. But they wrote a statement in support of the One Church plan saying, we don't think this should divide the church. It's important, but it shouldn't be the defining issue for the United Methodist Church. It went viral, and within 8 hours, we had over 15,000 signatures from young people. So the thing is, this is really important for us to make some decisions as a congregation, because A, it's not likely to change, and B, we will lose our witness in the U.S., especially, and in Western Europe, with the next generation if we do not do something different moving forward. So, okay. Jim Ahrens.
Thank you, Jim Ahrens. I have a couple questions, but as you said, there are people on both sides who are good people, believe they are doing right. I personally believe the traditionalists are doing very wrong. Just like the church has split before with people on both sides who felt they were doing right. Last time it was over slavery. The process, any process of disaffiliation or change is going to take time. I'm having a bit of a problem. What do we do? I mean, I'm not real comfortable with my part of the apportionment going to help the church build up this draconian mechanism that is proposed for enforcing what I believe to be an inherently ungodly policy. What can we do?
Yep. There will be some conversations in our strategic council and our finance team to discuss what we will do with our apportionments. This congregation pays apportionments to the Minnesota Annual Conference and the General Conference. They mush together. Our current apportionment is $303,000 a year. It's a substantial sum. And our strategic council and our finance team will be discussing whether we should escrow our apportionment. So that's a possibility for us as one way to say we're not for this. Yeah. Other questions? All right. One more, and then we're going to, John is going to make, and Taylor are going to make a statement from the Strategic Council. They are Strategic Council chairs. And then, is Randy here? There he is. And Randy has a short little statement to make, and then we'll close.
Do you have a sense kind of what the percentage of churches in North America are that would choose to disaffiliate? Is there, you said you'd heard quite a fervor around some of these churches, and the church in Kansas City, that pastor is actively leading a discussion. I'm just curious. We have academic institutions to support. We have hospitals that we provide support to. So there's this huge infrastructure. It's not just this building and this group of people.
That's right.
So is there a thought about how big that church might be if we choose to break off?
It's too early to tell. Tomorrow there is a clergy gathering of the Minnesota Annual Conference clergy, and 260 are signed up already, and I think there will not be of one mind, although Minnesota is pretty progressive. But nationwide, if we go by the votes for the one church plan, that include the centrists and the progressives, that's about 66% of the U.S. the U.S., which would probably be about, two-thirds of, do the math, 2/3 of 7 million. It's probably 5 million or so. So it's a substantial number of people. And part of the disaffiliation conversations will, if there is a split, instead of people just splintering off congregation by congregation or even conference by conference, I think it's better if we do that in an orderly way and do that in a thoughtful way, and then we can deal with those questions about how will those boards and agencies and institutions be, how will that work? We just don't know yet. There will be some churches that are already going to leave. There are even traditionalists who are already going to leave. They were going to leave with the WCA. Now they're going to leave on their own. We already know that. But I think it's better if we can make some moves that say we're going to stand up against this. Maybe we work with our apportionments. Maybe there are some other things we can do. But to wait and see how this unfolds. And then the congregation will have to take a vote at some point. You have to be a member of Hennepin to vote on disaffiliation. You have to be a member. So if you've been loving Hennepin for a long time, but you have never voted because you're standing against this thing in the United Methodist Church, please join, because then you'll have a chance to vote one way or the other on how you feel about this. We need to wrap up the question and answer time. I will give you my email. It's judy@haumc.org. You can email me, and I will email you answers back. And if I don't know, I will say, I don't know. It's too early to tell. And I will let you know. I will be updating you almost weekly on what's happening out in the connection and sending out that by email. You'll get a letter they're going to tell you about this. So you go ahead. I'm stealing your thunder.
Thanks, Judy. I'm John. This is Taylor, and we're around. We are happy to talk with you any Sunday. Stop us. If you catch us. I guess it doesn't have to be Sunday. If we're in the building or around, just stop us and talk to us. The Strategic Council and the Executive Committee met last week to begin our conversations regarding our response to the decisions made at the recent special session of the General Conference. We want to emphasize that we have a long history of being an inclusive church, and we will continue to be so. So next steps, what are we going to do? First, we're going to hold listening sessions like this and others with the congregation, as your input is the most important part of this process. There are conversations about forming a new United Methodist Church bubbling up across the U.S. Judy mentioned those conversations with Adam Hamilton. If you want to follow some of that, his blog, he is updating a lot, so it's a good source for information if you're looking for a source. And that church would be Inclusive Methodist Church. We need to be patient, as these options do take time to develop. Now is the time to reflect, discuss, and pray. It is not a time for us to act rashly. Our plan for next steps will emerge and will be presented to the congregation for vote before any binding action is taken. A statement from the Strategic Council will be written for next Sunday and will be distributed next Sunday and mailed on Monday the 18th. It is important for all of us to remain engaged and committed to Hennepin during this time by continuing to support Hennepin Ministries with your prayers, presence, gift, service, and witness. We need to stand firm and strong as we continue to love and support and minister to all people. We will provide periodic updates to the congregation as developments occur, so you'll be sick of hearing us talk to you about this issue before we have a resolution. That is our goal. We want to communicate and be open with everybody. That's really important to us through this process. We do feel the sense of urgency in the congregation and the Strategic Council, and we will be continually focusing on this matter. We're not sitting back and waiting for something to happen. We will keep talking about this even as plans develop, and we will be analyzing them as things occur. Hennepin is a member of the Reconciling Ministry Network, and we will be meeting with other reconciling churches on March 14th at 7 o'clock here at Hennepin. We will also gather at Eden Prairie UMC on March 30th at 11:30 a.m. to strengthen our connections with other United Methodists who are working for full inclusion of all people. We will continue to be an important voice in the discussions with other reconciling inclusive churches about our upcoming decisions.
And I would just echo what John said about the availability of the Strategic Council. So we're here and we want to hear from you. We want to talk through what's going on with you. So please approach us and have those conversations with us. And I would also encourage everyone to stay engaged and read the statement from the Strategic Council next week and know who those members are. And please continue to engage as we decide what the next best steps for Hennepin Avenue United Methodist Church are.
I know that there are some of you who are just very angry and very disturbed by the General Conference's decisions, as I am as well. And I just want to tell you that I am here, as I said last week, to listen and to sit with you in your grief and your anger. I've had several people call, many people, and I am here to minister with you and to you during these uncertain times. I personally am very encouraged by your presence here and by your love for this church. You have never stopped being passionate about being fully inclusive. You have been deeply committed even when it is difficult and not popular. You are people of great grace and fortitude, and we will get through this, and we will do it together. There are exciting days ahead. Pastor Nate is moving on to Richfield, another reconciling congregation that is deeply committed to this. And we will be looking to see, staff parishes talking about whether we ask for another clergy or whether we will hire a youth director, a director of young adults and youth ministry. But in any case, it's important that you continue to support the church financially so that we can move ahead in our ministry in a way that is strong. The worst thing we can do right now is say to each other, to say to your spouse, to say to your partner, I'm going to hold back until I know for sure what the United Methodist Church is going to do. We are going to be here. Why? Because our ministry matters. What we do here ministers to all people. And scattering away to go join some other church will diminish the ministry capacity here at Hennepin to reach the very people you are standing with and for by coming to this meeting. So let us gather together and let us be strong and create a movement of love and grace that is so powerful, so compelling, and so contagious that others will say, I want to be a part of that kind of church. Amen? Amen. I want to offer just a moment for Randy before we go. He has a powerful story, and it's not going to be long, but I do want you to hear it because it moved my heart, and I know it will move yours as well.
Good afternoon. I grew up as a Methodist. I was active in UMYF, the District Council on Youth Ministries, and the Conference Council on Youth Ministries. Freshman year of high school, sophomore year were really hard. I wanted to be gone. I didn't know if I wanted to be gone from this world, but I wanted to be gone from my home and my home life. But I had my church. I'm still friends with people I met on the Conference Council on Youth Ministries who every day or every 3-4 months I got to see that let me be me back in the 80s, where it wasn't able to be out at the time. Once, growing through that time, through the 83, 85, 87, I attended the annual conference in Iowa. One of the things that has always stuck with me every year was the vote on whether they should ordain gays and lesbians. The first year, in 83, it was a resounding no. In 87, we had to stand and be counted. Again, that was 87. Then I left church. 6 years ago, when Libby was born, we talked about what do we want to do, and I wanted Libby to have the experiences I had. We went to a few churches. We walked in here. We never left. We were with the history of the church and how this church has fought for human rights in the 50s when they welcomed Border Chapel. I've always known about the reconciling ministry since 93. That's what brought us here. Now is not the time for any of us to leave. It's the time to keep fighting the fight we fought. And we're going to stay, and I hope everyone stays and remembers that's what you're here for, is you believe in what this church is doing. And we can do it together, not separately. Thank you.
Thank you. Amen. We have such an important ministry here. We have parents who bring their kids here because they think maybe they've seen some signs that maybe they're non-binary. And they bring them here because this is a safe place where they know their child will be held as a person of sacred worth. We must stay strong. We must stay together. We must be the church that God dreams, a church that is for all people, filled with the compassion and love of the God whose love never quits. I am so blessed to be your pastor. And as we go now, let us go in one heart as we go to bless the world and do justice together. Amen? Amen. Thank you for coming.